Welcome everyone. Many of you will be new to my channel and I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Eran and I'm making a world which I'm showing small snapshots of through my videos. In my first video, I showed the horse lords of Eran in the lesser steppe of the northern continent. In this one, we are pivoting to a collection of islands in the ocean far to the southeast. My returning viewers will know that I promised to do a showcase of the language of Eran. I had a fully recorded video that I was in the process of editing, but I was unsatisfied with it, so I have returned to the drawing board to get it to a higher standard. And in the meantime, I was working on this project. So, without further ado, let's dive in.
Doudila tous, yosso guido haroim podamet, guido no donwa bog donwad batisu.
Doudila is an archipelagic language spoken in the Soor Islands by a people that migrated here in waves over the last 1,000 years. Currently living in a local Bronze Age, these islands have undergone increased urbanization in the last 200 years or so, which began with the most recent migration to the islands, which clustered around natural harbours safe from storms. This most recent migration assimilated linguistically to the pre-existing language here, but in doing so also resulted in a decent amount of phonological change due to the substrate effect. And now we find the language at this time, the time of war in the Bay of Stone, the time of centralization in the lesser steppe. The language possesses a fairly modest consonant inventory, exhibiting a suite of labial, coronal, and dorsal stops. Primarily, it distinguishes between voiced and voiceless stops, though notably, it does not possess the voiced velar stop. Historically, this consonant split into its voiceless and fricative counterparts, depending on its environment, and is the origin of the r and k alternation that exists in words of common etymology. Unlike English, it has a relatively small series of fricatives, with only 4 of them. It distinguishes between sa, sha, ja, and ha. The other notable feature that it has evolved is the distinction between both the alveolar and uvular trills. This distinction is one that varies notably across the dialects and accents spoken in the islands. For example, Consonants has merged the 2 sounds into the uvular trill. Oredalo Jan Suissor evolved the alveolar trill into the voiced alveolar fricative and the uvular trill into the alveolar trill. The dialect represented in this video, that of Sotaswe is the most influential of the islands in the chain, and it shortened the alveolar trill into a tap and has the uvular trill and alveolar trill exists in 3 variation with each other. When it comes to vowels, it has 8 phonemic qualities, 4 of which distinguish length, I, E, U, and O. The other 4, U, and A, form a comprehensive central vowel series, and similarly to the trills, frequently vary in exact realization across the islands. There exists 1 vowel allophone in the dialect on Sotaswe Sohirodwo, which is that of A becoming A when after W, wa. Doudila also has 5 diphthongs, 3 fronting and 2 backing diphthongs. In addition to these vowels, the nucleus of syllables can be syllabic consonants which came from the loss of some historic unstressed vowels. There are a few phonological processes that operate in the language, namely T prosthesis, H prosthesis, syllabic prosthesis, and deaffectation. T prosthesis is a subset of syllabic prosthesis, which is when a monosyllabic word with a syllabic consonant nucleus precedes a word beginning with a vowel. In that circumstance, it becomes an onset cluster. For T prosthesis, this also broadens to replace alveolar consonants in the onset of the first syllable. For example, ut plus sotatet becomes tutatet. H prosthesis occurs when a word ending in a vowel is followed by a word beginning with a vowel. An H is then prefixed to the following word, as vowels are not allowed to be in hiatus in this language, including across word boundaries. Finally, deaffectation is a form of ablaut that occurs when the epenthetic D is inserted between a word final vowel and a vowel initial affix. The affectation affects 3 vowels and changes them in this way: A to I, E to U, and O to I. This affectation arose from ancient nasal vowels, which evolved in a different way to the non-nasalized versions. It's primarily an analytic language, though archaic forms of the language used to have a 3-fold case system: direct, oblique, and genitive. But Doudila lost them due to a mixture of phonological erosion and apocopy. The system of 5 noun classes, once distinguished by the case system, now survives in the use of classifiers fossilized into their grammatical role and devoid of other meaning. But doudila tous also operates without articles, relying on context instead. Noun declension does vary slightly when taking some affixes, and nouns can be split into 3 main classes: null class, T class, and D class. Null class nouns form plurals by appending the plural suffix or dor. The D appears as an epenthetic consonant between 2 vowels and causes the aforementioned deaffectation. T-class nouns have a word final S, but when taking the plural suffix and other suffixes, they take the form tes or tas, replacing the S. The vowel cannot be predicted. However, in the majority of cases, the root ending tes occurs. D-class nouns have a word final T, but when taking the plural suffix, they take the form det and then append the suffix. In addition to that, verbs take no marking themselves, but do work alongside various auxiliaries which communicate tense, aspect, and modality. Most particularly, the modality system is relatively complex, with multiple modalities using the same auxiliary verb and being distinguished by the use of tense, aspect, and mood. Some of that simplicity ends there, however, as the syntax of doudila tous exhibits a feature common to almost all of the archipelagic languages: syntax switching. In order to mark the indicative and subjunctive, doudila tous switches between a head final and head initial syntaxes. In the indicative, clauses are verb initial and auxiliary final. The subject usually precedes the object. However, in affirmational sentences, the object is placed first in the clause when it is the topic. By comparison, in the subjunctive, clauses are verb final and auxiliary second, and the subject always precedes the object. As such, these following word orders are all valid in certain situations. But this can also vary, most particularly in the subjunctive, where particles can take that clause initial position, resulting in a particle, auxiliary verb, subject, object, verb word order. Certain constructions which produce modalities require being in the indicative or subjunctive, and as such trigger syntax switching. This grammatical feature is perhaps the most divergent across dialects, as which modalities trigger this syntax switching varies somewhat. Additionally, some dialects trigger syntax switching in other environments as well. So, upon receiving the taunt from my good friend Miles, I first attempted to gloss the text, breaking it down into its most fundamental building blocks. Then, I attempted, strong emphasis on attempted, to render it into English. So here we can look at this first sentence for an example of my method. In Nasibo, noun affixes are almost exclusively suffixes, as it is primarily a head initial language from what I could tell. This meant that when I was trying to find the root among the provided dictionary, I could look first for entries that matched the first syllable, and then if necessary match the second syllable. For example, pabon is made up of pa and bon. With the root isolated, I could then determine the grammatical role of the suffix. In the previous example of pabon, I believed the bon was the plural marker. I repeated this process with every other word in the remaining sentence. From there, I went through the entire text, coming to the gloss text as shown here. With a full understanding of each root and the grammatical components associated with them, I could attempt to render it in a form that, well, rather than make sense, shall we say, was readable. However, as you will see, my first attempt was rather rough and raw, and I needed to go through it again, combing it for any semblance of meaning. And it is as follows. Stop using air around grass, so that sell some seeds to a small group of people, and then to sell them while they die, while turning thy ears into thy head. Subsequently I come, thy command, a great salty following. I walk closer to the dry northern liquid from the big hole, while joining the source of 9 rivers. Look around my walkway on the old bridge for Vineman, said an old wiseman baby. I would like to walk closer, while thou savest up a sack, using a rip, using healing. Reading Person's Building told the baby, they begin to heat using the sun, while eating some snacks. We begin to be small, my hope, using my sack, while beginning to be small. And yet they begin to fail me using a rip, and then rip away thy wearing, while I begin to be small. The baby said to them, I stop saying a little saying, big sack of healing, but they will not begin to be big, and then to fail 4 great days. My second attempt is certainly more readable and makes more sense, though it isn't hard to make more sense than none at all. This render is the one I translated into doudila tous and sent off, passing on the curse to its next victim. 6 days of 3 sons of the moon, stop flying about the grass so that thou sellest some seeds to a band of people, and then selling them while they die while changing thy ears into thy head. Subsequently I come at thy command, following saltily. Walk closer to the dry liquid from the big northern hole while joining the source of 9 rivers. Look around my narrow walkway upon the old bridge with 4 trees, said the old wise man to the baby. I would like to walk closer whilst thou savest a sack with a rip using thy healing, the library told the baby. They begin to warm in the sun while eating some snacks. We begin to diminish my hope due to my sack. While diminishing, they begin to fail me with a rip and rip away thy cloth while I diminish, the baby told them. I stop saying a word, the big sack of my healing, but they will not begin to be big and then fail 4 years. From here on is the translation into doudila tous. Unfortunately, there were 3 mistakes I made, which I expect will have shifted the meaning of the later torches slightly. You will see where those are, as they'll be noted in brackets with italics on screen. I have also colour-coded both texts to show how each sentence and the words involved relate to the translated sentence. So, without further ado, the translated text.
Bodetor los bodedor oidadindo. Obedson aster nudin, rohonwo linisor se hadraebo. Tohoni onwo rur ebi narl, rur ebi he hewerli se jotli. Oni hil ansequedoito, ili dilan ahpin oin. Il se soren din de dale, isode kedibet nudin, ebi heni suso hipor in setan. Arbed ilibitan sominan oipo haredala debit isir ahpin sutasor ai nudin. Que otasorjoi shirart. Ano runder lurlir, il ebi habutas lihibun ahpin rei. Teorodoid shedekudan que joet shirart. Dinde doit roer sam boda uda hebi ko roer kawop. Shekar sedu dan, uda ro hibnan. Ebi shek ore roer an uda ahpin re to hoim raboit binali ebi shekan. Que shirart roer. Que an qued observe ibne shedekudan. Altutatet roer o tohoni ore hoidolos ai. And so that is the torch that I sent off to the next person in the chain, and I hope they had a good time with it. I'd like to give thanks to my friend Yeko for my new profile picture, to my friend Nexus for helping me bash through a writing block on this script, and to the folks at Langtime Studio and Let's Have a Booba for pushing me onwards with my conlanging. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to thank George Corley for including me in this event. I hope to see you all again next year.